Welcome to What You Really Want to Know. I'm attorney Amanda Shaffer. Today we have a special live edition of What You Really Want to Know. We're going to talk about some of the new immigration actions that we've been hearing about in the news. Let me just check if this Instagram thing is working. All right. I was trying to do it live on Instagram, but I can't tell you if it's working or not. Anyways, if you're on Instagram and you want to watch along and it's not working, you probably don't hear this, but you can go to Facebook or YouTube to watch as well. Before I get into that, a couple of things. Number one, don't forget to like us and follow us on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter and LinkedIn, and follow us on YouTube or subscribe so that you don't miss any more of our lives or any other of our informative information. So today, like I said, I want to talk about some of the new immigration actions that President Biden has been signing as executive orders, executive actions, because what we have been experiencing since his inauguration is that we're getting a lot of questions, a lot of calls, a lot of people are hearing all different types of things. A lot of what you're hearing is not necessarily true. And by the way, if you're watching and you do have a question about anything I'm saying, feel free to ask me. Hopefully this all works. I can see it and I can answer. If not, I will definitely answer you after the fact. But, you know, as an immigration attorney, I feel that I have a duty to the public to help inform and kind of push out that bad information, because there's a lot of things happening right now. It's confusing, and a lot of people think that they can do things that they can't do yet, but they're hearing they can. Hi, Z. That's exactly what I'm planning to do. He says, please tell us about what's new and what's going on. 100%. That's why I'm here. So there's a bunch of things to talk about today. In order to help me out, I put a little PowerPoint thingy together. Oh, here we go. You don't need to really see me. And like I said, at any point, if you have questions, let me know. At this point, you'll see it's very basic what we know about a lot of this stuff. And that's kind of the point here, that a lot of changes people think took place wasn't actually a change or anything. It was, in fact, just really President Biden's wish list on immigration. So we'll get to that. So let's get started. So we're looking at what you really want to know, President Biden's actions on immigration. Oh, I clicked that twice. All right. First, the travel ban, also known as the Muslim ban, has been ended. This is what went into effect in January 2017. You're welcome, Z. Well, I'm happy to show your comment as well. And thank you for watching all the videos. So in January 2017, then President Trump put in a ban on travel from certain countries that were deemed to be a national security threat. They were also Muslim majority countries. And basically what it said is that they were not allowed to issue any visas. If you are a permanent resident, or you have a green, or you are a U.S. citizen, or you had a valid visa on the effective date, you could still come to the U.S., but no more visas were being issued. And it affected refugees, really everybody else. And the countries that were on this list, well, if you remember, there were 3 versions. We don't need to get into it. 2 got blocked, third went into effect. That banned Iran, Libya, Somalia, Yemen, Venezuela, and North Korea. And I think Chad was on there, but Chad got taken off. February 2019 added Myanmar, Eritrea, Kyrgyzstan. Ooh, I'm having trouble with that one today. Nigeria, Sudan, and Tanzania. So there's no more ban. The U.S. embassies and consulates abroad in these countries, which were previously not processing visa applications, were ordered to begin processing them again. In 45 days, we should have a status report. Now, and then 120 days, we should have a report on the national security concerns that there was and what the vetting process is like. Because right now, these countries, although they can apply for visas and be issued visas, they still have very strict vetting process in order to go through security clearance. So the Biden administration is taking a look at that to see if that was really necessary. So that's the first thing. So this one's pretty straightforward. If you or any of your family members are from these countries who were prevented from coming to the U.S. because of the travel ban, that is no longer going to prevent them. Next, 100-day freeze on deportations. This is a very, very important one, and that is why I have a little asterisk on it. And I wrote awaiting further guidance, and I'll explain exactly what I mean. Now, first, let me tell you what this is. 100-day freeze on deportations. It's not a blanket across the board. It's pretty much as across the board as you're going to get, but it excludes terrorists, terrorist suspects, spies, people convicted of aggravated felonies, and anyone who is undocumented and arrived in the U.S. after November 1st, 2020. What this basically means is that if you have an order of removal or an order of deportation, then from the day this was signed, I think it was the 20th it was signed, for the next 100 days, you cannot be deported from the U.S., period. It applies to anybody, again, presently inside the U.S. In terms of why I have an asterisk. Well, first of all, I should also say this can affect up to 25,000 people. That's important, and it's the most restrictive ban that's been in place like this since ICE was created, the Immigration and Customs Enforcement, in 2003. So the reason they're doing this is because obviously our immigration system is in huge disrepair, and there's not just because of COVID, it predates COVID a long time, and they're taking a look at how to fix these things. Now, they're also redirecting a lot of resources that were used to deport people in order to process asylum seekers at the southern border, and also to review all of the last 4 years and the immigration enforcement priorities. So the asterisk, the reason I got this asterisk here is because on February 1st, the Secretary of Department of Homeland Security is supposed to issue written guidance regarding what's going to happen here. So what I mean by that, you might have family and friends who are currently detained by immigration, who have orders of removal waiting to be deported. So a lot of top questions I've been getting, are they going to sit in jail this whole time? Are they going to sit down and just get deported? Or can I get them out now if they are bond eligible, or if they weren't before, if they weren't bond eligible, are they now bond eligible? Those questions nobody has answers to yet, because we need the written guidance from the Department of Homeland Security to tell us. I mean, it doesn't make sense, on a logical standpoint, to hold people in detention when you're holding them to deport them, but then you can't deport them. But at the same time, they have to make sure they have to have their protocols in place. So basically, we don't know yet what's going to happen with all of this. But what we do know is that nobody will be physically removed from the country for at least 100 days. Now, like I said, this can affect bond eligibility. That's important. It also hinted at DHS was removal priorities. What was the other thing? It'll come back to me. People who have old removal orders, this is important. They're going to look at when they're going to allow people to maybe reopen those orders or reconsider those decisions to apply for other benefits, whether the judge will do it on their own or whether you'll be able to get a chance to apply for things. So it's possible that somebody who right now has an order of removal will find out in a few weeks that there is a way to get rid of that order of removal that didn't exist before. But that's all we know, that might be the case. So nothing can be done right now. Even if you wanted me to review your case right now to see if you'd be eligible, I wouldn't know what the eligibility requirements are or what I'm seeing if you're eligible for, because it's kind of just, open-ended right now. But again, I know the bigger things we're looking at least in the short term, is what they're going to do with the people who are currently detained, awaiting deportation. Are they going to be allowed to be released? If so, will it be automatic, or do we have to apply for a bond? That's what is really, in my mind, the most important thing here. So Z, he's got a question here. What if someone gets deported with fake travel documents? Well, Z, I'm not talking about right now people who get deported, talking about people in the U.S. awaiting deportation. So this doesn't apply to someone who's already been deported. This only applies if you're in the U.S., you have an order to be deported from the U.S., but you're still actually in the U.S. That's been put on hold for 100 days. After the 100 days, will they start deporting people? I'm sure they will. They did also mention, which goes into our next topic here, who they're going to be targeting for deportation more. It's different than the past 4 years. But at this point, we are only looking at people inside the United States. And any type of relief that for someone who's already deported, that's a whole nother thing, not on the docket at this point. Next, we have change in enforcement policies back to Obama era. Basically what that means, I skipped ahead here, that's fine. But basically what that means is that when President Trump took office, he rescinded basically all of President Obama's enforcement priorities, which instead of looking at deporting anybody who is here illegally, there was really a focus on certain people like terrorists and spies and people that were a danger to national security or public safety, aggravated felons, like people with serious criminal history. So there was a nice little period of time there where people who may have been here legally may have even had an order of removal, but had no criminal history, that they weren't really worried about ICE coming to pick them up and actually physically removing them from the country. So what Trump did was he took that away. So that meant, like, this includes people who got caught up in like a workplace raid. You might be illegal and they were just raiding your workplace, and now you're in removal proceedings. But they're not going to be doing that, at least they said for now, because they don't have a lot of resources. There's a lot of problems, not a lot of resources. They want to focus the money on deporting the really bad people. And that's what Obama did. And that really didn't take effect, by the way, for Obama until really the second half of his second term. I mean, his second term in general, but really more so the second half. So this is really good news because it makes our job a little easier, since a lot of times, when people are in that position and you can't do anything for them, it can be difficult. And we also are hoping that more comes along with this in terms of not just stopping people from being deported, but hopefully helping them gain legal status, which is something I will touch on again in a second. So what's important here to remember is you can have some less fear these days walking outside. ICE is not just going to walk up to you randomly to check you and stop you, unless you have a criminal record or a warrant or something. You can pretty much be sure that that's not going to happen for now. But again, we're still waiting on more guidance for this, but essentially until we get new guidance or additional guidance, we're looking at what Obama's priorities were. I already clicked the next one, which is construction on border wall halted. This one, pretty straightforward as well. Essentially, Biden ended the national, hello Sandeep, thanks for watching. Biden ended the national emergency declaration that was declared by Trump in order to construct the wall. And he now has tasked the officials with reallocating the $1.4 billion that was set to construct the wall. That's pretty simple. Next one, reaffirm protections for DACA. Now I have a little circle here. Mohammed, perfect timing. I was just about to talk about DACA here. We got this question. What about DACA? Here you go, Mohammed. So I got a little circle bubble here that says may change, and I'll talk about that right now. So what Biden did with DACA is he basically reaffirmed that we're not getting rid of it. He ordered USCIS or DHS to keep it in place, to keep processing applications, initials, and renewals. And this includes work permits and travel documents as well, which is all great news for anyone with DACA. What it doesn't do is there's no legal path to a green card or citizenship with this. This is literally just DACA. What you knew of DACA then, what you knew of DACA now. One of the main differences from a few months ago, Although they just started allowing initial applications again, you don't have to worry about that being taken away. You can still apply for DACA if you qualify. Now, like I said, I have this little circle thing here, little footnote saying it may change. The reason is that in the state of Texas, in federal court, there's still a challenge to DACA's legality. And that we expect the court there, I think it's the district court still, not the appellate, to make a decision very soon on whether or not DACA was legally created by Obama. This has been a lawsuit that dates back to Obama's term. So if Texas, if the federal court there says that DACA is illegal, well, then there can be appeals to the appellate court and eventually the Supreme Court, as we've seen some of this happen already with DACA. Will DACA be able to continue in the form it is, or it is right now, while the appeals are pending? We don't know yet. That's going to depend on the appellate court issuing a stay. In other words, saying that this order doesn't take effect until the appeals are over because of the harm, basically, that it can do and things like that. So we're going to always keep our eye on DACA, and we're hoping that this bridges the gap now for DACA recipients between now and when Congress can finally pass a law to actually give them a legal path to status. So this is one you're going to want to check in on later on. We'll, of course, provide updates. But again, most important thing, if you have DACA and you can renew it, go ahead. If you need to travel for, I think it's humanitarian reason, family or work, apply for a travel document. And if you've never applied for DACA before, but you're eligible, certainly go ahead and apply now. Okay. Again, any questions you have about any of this, please do not hesitate to ask. I will do my best to answer everyone's question. Next, my least favorite, and I'll tell you why it's my least favorite, not because I don't agree with what the bill's trying to do, but because this has created the most confusion among everyone. And this is the proposed immigration reform bill known as the Citizenship Act of 2021. Now, I also put an asterisk here saying awaiting further guidance. However, that maybe wasn't the best way to put it. Let me explain what's going on with this, because I think this is really, if you're watching, besides some of you looking to hear about DACA or deportation, this is really the big one. A lot of people think that there's a new law to allow them to get legal status if they're here illegally in one capacity or another. Unfortunately, that's not what the situation is right now. Before I explain that, what you should understand about this is that what Biden did was he proposed an immigration reform bill. He basically went to Congress and to the public and said, we need to fix the immigration system. This is how we should fix it. And then he outlined all of these points. There included DACA citizenship or path to citizenship. It included other people here legally, a path to citizenship. It was a massive modification of our current laws. Now, I'm not even going to sit here and tell you what those are. And the reason is this, because this proposed immigration reform bill has no effect. It cannot help anyone right now. And the reason is because it's not a law, because Biden cannot pass a law as president. Only Congress can pass a law, and then Biden signs it into law. Now, last week, I put up a post. If you want to check, should be on all of our, it's on our Facebook, it's on all of our social media accounts. I put up a video called I'm Just a Bill by Schoolhouse Rock. And if you don't know this video, it's a cute little video. It's 3 minutes long, and it accurately describes how a bill in this country becomes a law. And this is what I think really a lot of the misinformation surrounds here. So what Biden did was propose a bill to Congress. Now, Congress doesn't have to do anything. And if it was a Republican Congress, a different party from the president, maybe they wouldn't. But what Congress can do is make their own law. So you have the House of Representatives and you have the Senate. They both make up Congress. They both have to pass the law by at least a majority of the vote. And the law that the House passes has to be the same law that the Senate passes. Once they both pass the same law, It then goes to Biden to sign. Once Biden signs it, it becomes a law. If Biden vetoes it, which, if it's an immigration reform bill, obviously we don't expect, but just to let you know what happens, if Biden says, I'm not signing it, I'm going to veto it, then Congress in both houses can override the veto by a 2/3 majority vote. So they vote again, and 2/3 this time say, we want this, it becomes a law, regardless of the president. We don't foresee that happening. Vetoes are more or less rare. But bottom line is this. A bill is not a law. All Biden did was say, here's a bill. I like this bill, take it. Like I said, Congress can look at it and say, this is great, we're going to write our own bill that's similar or has some of your points. There's no requirement they do anything that Biden wants. But as the leader of our country, as the leader of the majority in Congress, he does have a lot of sway. So I'm not trying to be pessimistic or put anyone's hopes down. I am just trying to be real with everyone to make it clear that there is no more information on this at this point, because there might be, like, for example, they can all say all they want that they want someone who has DACA in 3 years to get citizenship. But if Congress doesn't pass that in the bill, it doesn't exist. So it doesn't matter that Biden wanted it. It doesn't matter that Biden introduced it. All that matters is what passes. And it can take a while to pass Congress. That's how our system of government is meant to be. It's not meant to make changes quickly. It is meant to take time. So we're hoping that Congress can get around to the immigration reform this session, which would mean, I think, by summer, I think is when the session ends. But point is, we will 100% let everyone know that there's a new law out there, and here's all the new people who can apply for things, and we'd be honored to represent each and every one of you in applying for anything you're eligible for. But right now, I can't even tell you what is out there, what it's going to be, or whether or not you will be eligible. So we just have to be patient. And the good news is there's a lot of hope. This is the most hope that we've seen in a long time in this area. And we know President Biden is very serious about pushing immigration reform and getting it done. And that's what you need in this country in order for it to actually get done. So stay tuned on that one. If you're just joining us, welcome. If you have questions, let me know. The bullet points you see up on the screen, I've gone through already. You can rewatch this, and I'm always here for questions. Next. So many calls. All right. MPP, or the Migrant Protection Protocol. Did I get that right? Migrant Protection Protocols, or the Remain in Mexican program, has been discontinued. This is the program that when people came to the U.S. border in the South to apply for asylum, they were processed and then sent to live in Mexico and wait in Mexico until their immigration court hearing. This was very controversial policy that the Trump administration put into effect. A lot of people are very happy to see it go. The reason that we are awaiting further guidance on here is because at this point, the discontinuation of MPP only applies to new cases. So if you're one of those people sitting in Mexico and there's about 70,000 of you waiting to find out, does this mean they're going to let me in the country now to wait until my asylum hearing? We don't know yet. All we know so far, it applies to new cases only. Nobody now is going to be forced to go back to Mexico once they've started the application process in the U.S. And then once they get that under control, they plan to issue further guidance on what we're going to do with that backlog of 70,000 cases. So another thing you're going to want to check back in with us, hopefully sometime soon, but it's definitely going to take at least a few months before we have information on that. Let's get a little sip here. Ooh, I foamed or buzzed. Anyways, non-essential travel restrictions at U.S.-Mexico border maintained. Now, this was the COVID-19 related travel restrictions that the Trump administration put into place, and Biden is continuing those. The only type of travel that's really supposed to be allowed, and this was an agreement between US and Mexico. So this goes both ways, that you're only supposed to be allowed to go back and forth if you're doing essential travel, which includes cross-border and trade and commerce, medical services, or education. However, this ban actually does not apply to a US citizen or permanent resident trying to get back to the US. You have every right to come back. They can't stop you. It allows the authorities to continue to immediately expel migrants caught at the border. And again, this is because they don't want to apprehend them, put them in detention if they have COVID, and then it spreads like wildfire. And then there was one thing else. Oh, the other reason that I put on this this little asterisk here is because Biden hasn't said yet how long this is going to stay in place, which, you know, makes some sense since we don't know how long COVID is going to be a problem. So non-essential travel restrictions will be lifted eventually, but for now, this is going to remain the same. Maria asks, how would Soman? I'm sorry, Maria, I'm not sure what you're asking, but if you can ask me again in a different way, I'll be happy to answer you. All right. Deportation protections for some Liberians. This is another important one, especially if you're from Liberia. There's something called Deferred Enforced Departure, or DED. It extends to 10,000 Liberians who fled their country after the Civil War there. And they've been living in the US now for, I think, decades. Kind of like temporary protective status, for TPS, for people from countries like Haiti and Nepal and Honduras, and I'm not sure the whole list right now. But point is that it's a temporary protection that can be taken away at any time. However, it has lasted for a very long time. And this extends it. It extends it 18 months if you have it. And it gives you temporary, not just protection from deportation, but work authorization. And it also allows new people who haven't had it before to apply for it. I don't even know how that happened. All right. Now this one, order excluding non-citizens from the census rescinded. Now, if you're watching this and you are not a U.S. citizen, you might not understand the importance of it, or if you are a U.S. citizen, you might not either. What the census does is it counts population. And if, as you may or may not know, the House of Representatives is based on population. So the more people that you have in your state, the more representatives your state has in the House. Of course, the Senate, there's only 2 per state. So if you're taking your naturalization test, by the way, and you're watching this, or you're preparing for it, this is some good practice. These are the questions. Anyways, the important part about the census is if you're going to exclude anyone who's not a U.S. citizen, obviously the population count is going to be much lower. And this is an incredibly important year because every 10 years, Congress gets to redraw the district lines. So the best and easiest way to describe this would be if you think about like a square. And let's say you have a square and your district is in that square and you have 1 representative. If they redraw the district and they now make it, because they can redraw it in funny little shapes, and they draw it like this, you're now in this district. You might have a different representative. You have a different population voting. So maybe you were in the majority when you were this way, but not when you're this way. So it's really important because you want to make sure that the state you live in, all the people are counted. Even though they can't vote, there's still people who live here. So that is done away with. So Mohammed has a question. So DACA applications can be filed and they will be approved in Texas, or they hold on to it. Okay, so you're asking if you file a DACA, what's going to happen because of the Texas litigation? Good question. Well, until something happens with the Texas litigation, like there's a decision, the USCIS is required to continue processing the applications. And that's part of why President Biden put out the executive order to make it clear that we are continuing to preserve DACA. They believe it's legal. So that remains unaffected. what can happen, and again, this is speculation, so I'm not going to talk too much about speculation because I want to really focus on, what's concrete and what we know. But if the district court says DACA is illegal, it could block it from continuing to be implemented nationwide. It could block it, and then the appellate court can, if they appeal it, stop the block temporarily. We don't really know yet. That we will know once we get the Texas district court decision, and that should be relatively soon. And one thing to keep in mind, if you've been following any of the DACA legislation, you may have realized some of the stuff went up to the Supreme Court. So this is similar. They're different issues, but it's similar in that there's still a process taking place. So even if the Texas district court says it's illegal, it's not over yet. It means that it could still be appealed to the appellate court and the Supreme Court. And while these appeals are pending, the courts can allow DACA to continue or can halt DACA. So we have to wait and see for that. Okay. And finally, new COVID-19 restrictions for non-US citizens who have been to certain countries. Specifically, they were talking about Brazil, Ireland, the United Kingdom, most of Europe, and South Africa. And again, I have this may change. We don't know how long this is going to be yet. And other countries can easily be added depending on how they're handling COVID-19. What this does mean, if you are a permanent resident, not a US citizen, it is possible that you might have trouble getting back here if you went to one of those countries. Great idea to reach out to an experienced immigration attorney about this. But essentially, this is really just this was something that the Trump administration had put into effect too. And then they removed it, and Biden has now put it back into place in order to protect against COVID. It looks like we have another question here. How can someone who has a case with the BIA and was never informed in any updates get them to respond to an appeal? And will this in any way help on getting it back to the US? Well, Maria, I'm not really sure. There's a lot of information I don't know based on your question. If a person is outside the US, then their appeal, except for very rare circumstances, the appeal isn't going to do much because you're already deported. When you're appealing your deportation and saying you shouldn't have been deported or shouldn't have an order of deportation. So if you've already been removed from the US, a lot of times those appeals no longer matter. It's called moot. It can be, there might be a decision made, but even if they approve it, getting back here is the problem. So if that's your question, just simply about somebody who's been deported and had an appeal pending when they were deported, will this affect that? Well, first, if I got that 100% right, no, none of this will affect that. The deportation stuff I was talking about, that under this 100-day freeze on deportations, that only applies to people currently in the U.S. So these are people who've already gone to the immigration court, seen a judge, been issued an order of removal or deportation, and either haven't left voluntarily and are still somewhere in the U.S., or are currently detained by ICE, and they haven't been able to deport them yet, or they're being currently detained and ICE is like, we're ready to deport them tomorrow. Well, unless they're a terrorist, suspected terrorist, spy, convicted of an aggravated felony, or arrived in the U.S. after November 1st, 2020, no, unless you fall into one of those groups, you cannot be deported for the next 100 days. And as I said earlier, and I think it's definitely an important note worth repeating, that's all we know about this. We know this combined with the fact that we're going back for now to Obama-era policies on enforcement priorities means that there's just going to be a different focus on not just who is deported, but who the government decides we are going to place into removal proceedings in the first place. Because you might know someone here illegally for years who's never seen an immigration judge, has never heard from the immigration court. or anything like that. And that is because there are too many people here illegally for them to put everyone in immigration proceedings. So they focus on certain groups of people that they believe are the highest priority. Now, Trump completely changed that by getting rid of these enforcement priorities and just saying basically everyone was. But we're back to the Obama era policies where they really were focusing on bad people and criminals and whatnot. And it doesn't just apply again to someone who's physically being kicked out of the U.S., but on people here illegally who would be in a position where they'd have to fight to stay in the country. We're taking a pause on that so they can look at all our enforcement priorities and be able to come up with a better plan, because trust me, we need a much better plan. Okay, Mohammed, she means I-130 appeals. Okay. Oh yeah, I-130 appeals. Those can sometimes get caught up in the stratosphere. What I mean by that is they kind of get lost out there sometimes, these I-130 appeals with the BIA. I have some my own clients who have been waiting for a very long time. Basically, if you appeal your I-130 on time, if you get it denied, timely appeal your I-130, then you're allowed to wait here, well, assuming you also concurrently filed for the green card, you're allowed to wait here while you're waiting for the appeal to be decided. If, however, you left the U.S. before a decision was made, then the only good news about that is that if you win your appeal and the I-130 is approved, it will still count as a good approval. They'll have to then go through consular processing and do the visa application through the National Visa Center and have your interview at the embassy abroad, but it is still a valid approval. Now, Maria, if you are still watching and you or whoever you're talking about doesn't even know what's going on with the case, and that's part of it, what you're talking about, well, if you didn't have a lawyer, I suggest you contact a lawyer to represent you and to basically contact the BIA and say, hey, what's going on here? I could do that for you. You can contact me privately after this. If you look on the bottom of the screen, our phone number and email address has been scrolling across this whole time. So, we do that for people all the time to find out what's going on. But I'll tell you this also, unless they're sending a request for evidence or they're making a decision or remanding it like back to USCIS, you can go years shouldn't be, but you can go at least a year or two without hearing anything. They're very, very backed up. And again, whether or not you should stay while that's happening, I qualified it a little bit earlier. It's best to ask an immigration attorney first before you decide to just stay, because everyone's situation is different, because we just want to make sure there's no negative repercussions if you were to stay in the U.S. during a pending appeal. But if you do leave, then at least if it gets approved, you'll be able to start working on the process that way. And now I'm asked, how can you appeal a deportation? Well, that is a very difficult question to answer because it depends on a lot of factors. One thing it depends on is if you're in the U.S. or not in the U.S. If you're in the U.S., it depends when you were ordered to deported. So if you were ordered more than 33 days ago, you can't appeal it anymore, timely. If it's more than 180 days, you can't do a motion to reopen or reconsider, that's timely. But there are exceptions to those rules. A straight appeal, though, unless it was only a few days late because you were like in the hospital, there are very narrow exceptions. It has to be 33 days from the date of the decision. That's when you appeal. And you appeal, you get the immigration judge order, you appeal to the Board of Immigration Appeals. If you lose that appeal, you can appeal to the second, I'm in the Second Circuit, to the appellate court, the federal appellate court. The federal appellate court may or may not take the case. If they don't, it's over. If they do, they can agree with the appeal, with the decision, or reverse it, send it back, and then we'll go back to the BIA, who sends it back to the judge. And yes, if the federal district court or the federal appellate court denies your appeal, you can technically appeal it to the Supreme Court of the United States, but you're likely not going to have your case heard unless it's about some type of issue that they've never discussed before. So to answer your question, Maria, succinctly about how you can appeal deportation, hopefully whoever is interested in appealing that deportation is within the 30 days. It's 33 if the decision's mailed, but for argument's sake right now, 30 days from the date the decision was made. Some exceptions can include if you had ineffective assistance of counsel during your proceedings, and now you're not timely. But again, if that's going to be the case, it's not called an appeal at that point. It would be called something else, called a motion to reopen or reconsider. But essentially, they're similar in that regard. And we will know more, hopefully February 1st, because that's when we're supposed to have more guidance. So we'll hopefully know more February 1st about what type of relief is going to be available for people. Like who's going to be eligible? Is there going to be anything new that you can be eligible for in order to reopen your case so you don't have the deportation anymore? We really don't know if there's going to be anything new yet, and if there is, what that will be. But of course, we're hoping, because I know that's the biggest one we're getting calls on. People have loved ones, especially the ones who have loved ones locked up right now. They don't want to have them sit in jail, and we don't want them sitting in jail either. So we're confident, we're hopeful that President Biden's administration will follow their timeline, and February 1st give us a better idea. And they also talked about we should have more understanding of their prosecutorial discretion and who they're going to focus on. Again, similar to focusing on who to deport. But what I also mean is there used to be something called administrative closure in immigration proceedings. And that would be if you're in court and you don't really have a path to legal status, but you don't have a criminal history, the government can't afford to really do anything with you to detain you and deport you. So they kind of close your case. You're not out of court, like proceedings altogether, but you don't have a future court date. And then you can renew work permits if you had something pending. And it really helped a lot of people who were going to have been deported if the government had the resources to, and allowed them to at least work legally while they were allowed to remain in the U.S. So it's possible some of that will come back. But again, the one thing I don't want to do right now is speculate, because we don't know yet. So those are all the major changes that have been announced so far. I want to just emphasize a couple of important things before I get going. And one last time, I'll say, if you have any other questions while I conclude, please feel free to ask. But essentially right now, Biden has introduced a bunch of different changes or hopeful changes to the immigration system. Some of them that I mentioned were clear cut. The border walls stopped. And they're going to reallocate the funds. The non-essential travel restrictions between U.S. and the Mexican border maintained. The COVID-19 travel restrictions for other countries are maintained. The deportation protection for some of the Liberians are now in effect. We're going back to Obama-era enforcement policies. Prioritizing criminals, terrorists, national security threats, public safety threats, serious criminals like aggravated felons type of thing. And what's more important, and the travel ban on Muslims, or the Muslim ban, whatever you want to call it, is gone too. But what we don't know yet is, with this 100-day freeze on deportation, what's going to happen to the people currently detained. Are they going to be released? Are they going to be released automatically? Are you going to have to file a bond motion? Will they be detained again after the 100 days? Will they have a chance to fight their deportation order? And because there are people in this category who have expedited removals. These are people in this category. Like, I had someone contact me who her significant other is a permanent resident. He had a fraud issue with the green card, and he didn't know what he was doing. They had involuntarily signed something that he'll deport himself, and he would not have been able to fight it. But somebody like that may end up really benefiting from some of these changes, because that's what they've kind of hinted at. But how, when, where, why, Well, the why is because it's the right thing to do. Other than that, I don't know. But February 1st is when we will hopefully know more information about that. And then everyone asking about DACA, like I said, all Biden's executive order on DACA did at this point was say, we are preserving DACA. We're going to have it continue to run in the way it's been run, hopefully to bridge the gap until Congress passes a law. But the one asterisk on this is to keep in mind this lawsuit going on in Texas. It's been going on for years, that Texas may come back, the federal court there, and say DACA is illegal. And then at that point, the question is, I mean, I assume they're going to appeal, but is that decision going to take effect? So is DACA going to be stopped until further notice, until the case is over and it's either gone or not gone? Or is the stop going to be stopped, essentially, and allow it to continue while they finish litigating it? So that was a lot of talking and a lot of stuff to talk about, but I will say this. So very exciting stuff. We've been through a long 4 years as immigration attorneys, and we have a long way to go to fix our system, a long way to go, but this is all very promising. It's definitely a more humane approach, a more compassionate approach to immigration reform and immigration enforcement priorities. But the big thing that if you're watching this out there to keep in mind is that keep your eye on our Facebook page and our website and all our Instagram, all our social media, because I'm going to talk about this more as we know more. But I will promise you this, I will not talk about something that I don't know anything about. In other words, if we don't know the details about, for example, who can now become a citizen who couldn't before, I'm not going to guess what that's going to be, because Congress is a rough place, and very few pieces, especially on issues that are there's so much debate and pushback on both sides. Very few issues go into our Congress and no changes to the bill. They become law exactly how they're written. It just doesn't happen. And our system doesn't want it to happen. So we don't know. We know that there's a lot of positivity, that Biden is pushing immigration reform. He's pushing pathway to legal status for a lot of people who would have never been eligible otherwise. And hopefully, and including DACA to get citizenship. And hopefully Congress will listen and pass a law and be able to work with each other and agree, and Biden will sign it. And then at that point, we will be thrilled to tell everybody the details and thrilled to tell everybody how we can personally help them. That, I think, unless we have any more questions, is all for what you really want to know. Thank you all for watching. I will be back tomorrow with a live. I haven't decided on what yet. Probably notable approval. If there's any more immigration news, I will bring that to you. I will post this little nifty chart with the video so you can take a look. And of course, don't forget to like us and follow us on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and all the social media. You could just like us and follow us on Facebook. You won't miss it. And if you need any help with any of your immigration matters or legal matters, please don't hesitate to contact us. We're here to help you. But if you ask me about the Citizen Act of 2021, I'm going to tell you I have no idea. You're welcome, Sherlyn. Thank you for watching. Thank you, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your day, and I will hopefully see you tomorrow.